I didn't always aware of gender equality during my work. Maybe it's because that there are a lot of brave and talented women around me, work with me. But I do feel the gender equality issues when I do the lobby to the government about the abolition of the death penalty. Because almost the government officials I met are men. I hope there are more women feel comfortable when they work for human rights and have chance to be the leader. And also more and more women can be the political leaders. The world can be better.
I believe that my desire for becoming a human rights lawyer stems from the helpless little girl who saw the injustice that women around her faced. My mom and most of the women I grew up around have been victims of domestic violence. And as a child, I did not have a language for the violation that I saw them experience. I did not have a way to channel the anger that I felt within me anytime I see one of these women suffer at the hands of another person. And I only knew within me that it was entirely wrong, that no one should be treated the way that I saw them being treated. No one should be taken advantage of because they are weak. And as I grew up, I started voicing out my opinions on these issues. And what was interesting is I did not even understand that there were human rights issues. There were women's rights issues. I did not even had access to the concept of feminism at the time. I just felt within me that this was wrong, and I identified that it was wrong, and I was speaking up against it. And it came from my inner desire of wanting to live in a world and a society that is just and that is fair. When I became a lawyer, I realized that I could do something about it by providing access to justice for individuals and also go on to contribute to addressing the root causes of these injustice by advocating for legal and policy reforms. Yes, this job is challenging. It mostly leaves me frustrated, but I go to bed knowing that I'm no longer that helpless child, and I also have a way to channel the anger and the frustration, and I could do something about creating a better society for everyone to live in. Yes, I do believe that there are some stereotypes and prejudice that are unique to women within the legal profession. Firstly, if I got $1 for any time someone tells me that I would probably never get married or find a partner, I would be financially rich. I guess being a woman and a lawyer equates to being single, especially if you're outspoken and assertive. Also, navigating your way, finding your footing within the legal profession can be challenging. And many times, sexual misconduct and harassment have largely been seen towards women. And this continues to affect female attorneys within the legal profession, with senior male colleagues at the bar constantly soliciting sex or making sexual advances in exchange for help that young female lawyers reach out to them for. Something else I'll add to that is the notion of women within the profession being lazy and not necessarily wanting to do the work to get to the top. And oftentimes, we as young female lawyers fall victim in the sense that we overwork ourselves to prove a point, and this in most cases affects our mental health, leading to low self-esteem and burnout. And most importantly, an element of human rights work is passion. And passion informs our advocacy. Sometimes this passion can show up in tears. And I have been told a few times that the reason why I am being emotional is because I am a woman, which I personally find unfortunate because connecting to an unjust situation should not be about gender. And mostly when you react to situations by crying, you're you're told that that is happening because you're a woman. And I just find some of those things as the prejudice and stereotypes that women are faced with within the profession.
I suppose I was attracted to the human element of criminal law. I did try commercial law for a few years, but I could never muster up enough passion for the field. The other reason, I suppose, is that I refuse to be cynical. I refuse to divide people into good or bad, people who offend, people who don't offend, them and us. I'm really not someone who favours othering people who do things that we deplore. I mean, in the first instance, we live in a very unequal society. But in the second instance, anyone can come in contact with the criminal process. Many people don't think they ever will until they do. So we should all be concerned about how our society treats what is probably the most disliked sector of our community, the most disenfranchised. I suppose that I would say to young aspiring female barristers that don't be intimidated. When I first started out, I was certainly convinced I was far too young and far too immature to be dealing with the kind of work of the seriousness that criminal law can be when people's liberty is at stake. Don't be intimidated. The first thing to always remember is that your client is much better off with you than without you. And the other thing I realised was that even with the most hopeless of cases, there's something very powerful about standing up and speaking for someone. You will find that you will touch a lot of your clients by the fact that you are just fighting for them. Some people will not have had that before or won't have had that very often in their life, and that can be incredibly powerful for that person. So just in terms of human connection and helping others, you can have an enormous effect, even if you can't necessarily help them with their legal issue. And I suppose the other thing I would say is that in the early years, life can be a bit chaotic. You're asked at the last minute to do cases, usually dropped by other people when you're trying to build up your practice. So you're being sent to one court or another all over the country to do quite small either applications or small trials. So it can be a quite difficult lifestyle in the first few years, but stick with it, do it, because you will build up your practice that way. And eventually you'll be able to establish protocols where you can have a bit more control over your timetable and what you do, and it becomes a whole lot more manageable.